that brings us back to our system. Now, it is a little more than that. And once we take a look at security groups and back at our employee list, we're going to go on into your system and take a look at some of the other fundamentals to our roles and groups, as well as our security groups and permissions, if that works for you. So
Yeah.
all of our users, wonderful. All of the users inside of CobbleStone, with the exception of those users who are indicated as system administrators on their employee profile, just like we did for you, need to belong to a security group, or at least have permissions assigned to them. And the easiest way to do this is through security groups. So if we head into Manage Setup on our top navigation menu, and it may be collapsed down into those 3 lines depending on your screen resolution, we're going to head down to Manage Security Groups. And this is broken down into a few different areas. So once we're on this page, system admins have a couple of options. Toward the left-hand side, we can select among the already created security groups. And we do have a handful of those that come right out of the box. Also, as soon as we enter, if we don't want to just select an existing one, maybe we want to create a new one, on the right-hand side, we have the option to do that. We just need to give it a name and select the license type, the license level type. Now, we don't have to worry about type if you're using traditional licensing, which is always an option when subscribing to CobbleStone. But very frequently, clients will go with leveled licenses. So as we see here, admin, super, standard, and read only. So if we do have a leveled license system, we are going to have to select that level. So we can just put that together and click Save. And then we double back to our list on the left, open that pick list, and grab our new list and start populating it. Now, there are many, many options inside a security group. Don't get too overwhelmed, though. There's a lot going on, but we really tend to focus on 2 major areas. The others can be useful, but they're not necessary for everybody, and I'll point those out. So the first area that is absolutely required is this first set of boxes, permission assignment. So to which areas of the system are the users able to access? Where can they interact with the system, and what is the extent of the user's visibility? And just like in most of the areas on this page, we've got a big long list on the left or on the right-hand side. We'll select them, click the blue arrow once we found the ones we want, and move them over to the left. Now, this list can be really long. It's not as scary as it might appear. To be perfectly honest, I was terrified of permissions the first few weeks that I was working with CobbleStone. That was until I learned how to read permissions, and we're going to go over that too. But we'll take the areas and actions in the system that we want. Again, on the right, click them so they highlight blue, click the blue left-facing arrow, and then the assigned items appear over here for us on the left. Field restrictions are an option. Again, not necessarily required. You probably won't have too terribly many of these, but field restrictions indicate that users of this security group cannot add or edit data for the fields that we've selected here. I like to think of field restrictions as being on a diet. You can look, but you can't touch. So you can see the information, you can see that wonderful slice of cake, but you can't mess with it. You can't eat it thanks to that diet. The biggest difference here with field restrictions is the way the fields are written out. In most places inside of CobbleStone, you're going to find the fields are written in a very friendly manner, and it might just have the table name, colon, field's display name. Here, however, it's actually looking at the technical versions of these, the way CobbleStone in the back end knows everything. So it's written as TBL, and then the table name, dot the field's name. And again, that's the system name for the field. More often than not, If either of those starts with a U underscore, that means it has been user defined. Now, it's not strictly the case. There are a handful of items that come out of the box from CobbleStone that are applied with that U underscore because they were created through the UI rather than on the back end. But it's always a good thing to look for. And again, you take it from the right, move it over to the left. The hardest part about that is reading that, okay, what is the system's table name? What is the system's field name? But once you've got that down, this is no problem. This applies, of course, to areas more than just the contracts. This touches almost every area in the system. So there are lots and lots of fields. The next option down are hidden subtables. This is a fairly new option for us with CobbleStone, but we can choose to hide specific out-of-the-box subtables or some user-defined subtables directly from the users in this group. So saying, okay, you know what, you can see all the data for the parent record and maybe some of the subtables, but you can't necessarily see all of the subtables. Maybe that information is a little more secure or just something that's not relevant to the members of that security group. So it gives us the table and then the subtable name. As we continue to scroll down the page, we have another couple more infrequently used because they're fairly new options for us. Hidden fields. This is a really cool feature. This is one place that we can choose to hide a field. So it's not even visible to a user, either on the add field or add screen rather, and or on the details or edit screen. So it's like that field doesn't even exist to some users. Again, members of this security group. Keep in mind here, and this is one that I learned the hard way, there are a handful of fields you absolutely never, ever want to hide, such as the record type. If you hide the record type, the system strips the information from it. So be really careful with that auditing and your master reference data kinds of items. Don't add those. This, just like field restrictions, is written as table.field, the system field name, so all the system information. The next one down, our fifth set of boxes, is managed reference data. If nothing is populated in here, then members of this security group can work with any piece of master reference data. They could select any location. They could select any type or status, provided those fields are editable, that is, or available on add. However, we can choose to limit what members of each group has accessible to them. So it's possible that we only want some users to build requests of certain types, and we can do that here. So if we choose, we can select the reference data kind that we need. So location details, contract types, etc. Those 5 major pieces of master reference data we talked about last time. Once we've added a restriction, again, if we look at contract types, for example, we can then go in there and choose the items for which each member of the security group does have access. Say, oh, well, I want to restrict your types, but you can only choose from CDA, NDA, or service agreement, for example. Then we could specify those 3 as available to members of this security group. And the same thing holds true with our other pieces of master reference data. Finally, our 6th set of boxes. This is the second really important one. This lets us take users from the right-hand side. These are users who have been assigned to the same license level as this security group. We take them from the right, we move them to the left, just like we have with almost everything else above it. And this is how we are assigning users to a security group. So we're saying, okay, well, you know, Ben Franklin here, he's not yet a member of this group. So I could click him, he's highlighted blue, click the blue left-facing arrow, and he's moved over to the assigned employees and users. Then Ben Franklin would be a member of this security group and would get all the permissions and restrictions that have been assigned above. This is just one way to add members to a security group. So keep that little note in the back of your mind. Absolutely wonderful. Now, just below those 6 boxes are 2 other sets of boxes that are really handy for us. And these allow dashboard assignment. So we can assign legacy or system dashboards or system graphical dashboards to every single member of the security group right from the security group page. This is a little backwards from the other 6 sets of boxes that we looked at. In this case, the available items are on the left, and we would select it, click the right-facing arrow, and then that would become the assigned items. Also different here is that you must click Save Dashboards, whereas in everything above, here we don't have save buttons because it saves for us automatically when we make a change. So do keep that in mind. But this is a wonderful way to set a system dashboard for a large set of users in a security group. And we're going to take a look at dashboards toward the end of today's session. Now, I've done an awful lot of talking about permissions so far. And as I mentioned, they scared the heck out of me when I first started working with CobbleStone. That was until I learned to read them. And reading them is really very straightforward. Almost every permission is written in this way. It's area and colon. So what module or area of the system does this permission apply to? Then action. What can the employee assigned to this permission do? And then finally, extent. If it applies, what is the scope the employee can perform that action? For example, we might have, for our basic type frontline users who don't need to add or edit contracts, we could give them contracts view my. So what's the area? It's contracts. What can they do? They can view. What can they view? They can only view the contracts that are assigned directly to them. So area, action, and extent. Contracts view my. They could also have requests. We want them to be able to add requests, so we could have requests add. Now, add does not have an extent. It's either you can add or you cannot add. We can build the restrictions in, remember, in that master reference data restriction up higher in the actual build of the security group. But we've got these for all of the major areas within here: calendar, contracts, hierarchy, requests, setup, etc. Action, and then extent. One rule of thumb I like to use is if I'm working with my, and users of this group also need to have access to everything in their department, I will give them both my and my department, because it's completely conceivable that there are records that are assigned to them that are not in their department, but we also want to see all of the records in their department that are associated with them and with others in their department or elsewhere. Of course, then you also have all, and that really means exactly what it says. So if I have contracts, edit all, a user with that could edit every and any contract inside of CobbleStone. So if we take a really quick look at assigning permissions, again, the first thing that I said is incredibly important. We'll grab it from the right, highlight it in blue, click that left-facing arrow, and moves it to the right. So with the assigned security role that we've got in here, the permission, contracts is our area, then view is our action. And what can they view in contracts? They can view all contracts. So this is one of those all kinds of permissions. But as you can see, we've, breaking down here on calendar, we've got my or my contract department, just my contract, and that continues on down the line for the various areas of the system. And then, as I mentioned before, adding users to a security group is just as easy. We're going to take a user from the right, click the left-facing arrow, and it moves them over to the left, just bearing in mind that the only employees who are going to show up in either of these boxes are employees who have been assigned the same license level as the level for which we're building the security group. So if we have leveled licensing, not everybody is going to show up on every single security group.